Hi everyone! I hope you're all having a great week. As luck would have it, I double-clicked on my camera screen and ended up not starting the camera when I had thought I had. So don't worry, I didn't do a whole lot. What you can see on my background right now is a bunch of swirls that I created just using some light washes of blue paint. And after I was done applying those swirls, I'm coming in now with some quinacridone deep gold, and I'm gonna start sort of filling in the spaces, the negative spaces in between the swirls to add a little bit of color. I had one sort of intention when I first started this painting, and then as I went along, which is not unusual for me, things sort of shifted, and you'll see how things change as we go along. I had the intention of coming back to this painting the day after I started it, but as life would have it, that's not how things worked out. uh, Other things came up that became priorities, and then my energy shifted, so I'm getting back to it now. And as I'm sure you won't be surprised, since some time has elapsed since I first started the painting, things have sort of shifted in my head as to what I want to do with this painting. So I've decided to change my color scheme up a little bit, and I'm gonna add some opera pink and a few, well, no, opera pink, and I'm gonna add some nickel azo yellow to sort of brighten things up in the background. And that's gonna help to shift the colors a little bit. The opera pink applied over the blue is gonna take on a bit of a purplish tinge, and I really like that. And I kind of feel like I want to make this painting happy and joyful. We are coming out of a very rainy spell here in Maine, and I'm very, very thankful for the rain, for one, because it waters my flowers, and I appreciate that. That means less work for me, and I don't have to feel guilty about running the hose. So, the rain has been good, but rain can also be a bit of a downer, especially when it lands, when it lasts a bit of a long time. So we're coming out of that spell. We have some more rain in the forecast over the next few days, but not immediately. Like, we're gonna have, I think, a little bit of a break, like maybe a couple 2-3 days of no rain, or if we do get rain, it's gonna be happening in the middle of the night. So I'm happy. It feels good to see the sun, and like I said, I do appreciate the rain. We need it, and especially considering all the forest fires that have been happening in Canada, I think it's important that we do get rain. But sometimes it's good to get a break from the rain as well. So it's really nice that we are getting this little break, and that's part of the reason I sort of wanted to shift things around with this painting, because I wanted to brighten it up and make it sort of like my version of an ode to joy, if you will. A little bit of a celebration of the sun coming out, and yeah, just celebrating life as a whole. I haven't yet heard back from my doctor regarding the results from my medical tests that I had done not too long ago. And I'm really making an effort to see that as a positive. The old adage, no news is good news, I think in this case applies, and so I'm going with that. When I'm going through a tough time, it can be really quite a big challenge for me to see the positive side of things. And years ago, when I was really struggling with deep depression, I was really trying to do my best to learn new skills and to figure out ways of managing my depression, but also learning new skills to help me manage my thoughts and help me, I guess, well, express my feelings. But one of the things that I realized when I was going through my depression is that my thoughts weren't always my friend, or my friends. In fact, it was, and I think I've shared this before, it was so easy for me to see the darker side of things, and my internal voice was not always very kind to me. And so I had to sort of figure out a way to shift things, because as I'm sure you can imagine, if you've got someone or yourself talking to you in a very mean way, it's hard to feel good when that's happening. And so I really had to learn to, number one, recognize that this was going on, to acknowledge that these thoughts were coming into my head, and also to realize that these thoughts were not facts. They were an automatic negative response that was happening in my brain so quickly that sometimes I wasn't even realizing what was going on. And so you can imagine that I've had reasons to be feeling down. I had all these negative things coming into my head, telling me really sometimes kind of cruel things about myself. And that's just not how I normally think of myself when I'm feeling well. So once I was able to recognize that the thoughts in my head were not facts, that the words that were coming to me that I was telling myself were not true, I could start to do the work of setting these thoughts and these beliefs aside. But I had to go about it in a way that was gentle. And at first, it almost was like I was saying last week, I wasn't really feeling like painting last week, and I kind of had to force myself to do it because I knew that if I did do it, that I would eventually feel better by just the fact of doing something that I enjoyed doing normally. So when I was going through this depression years ago and I was having all this negative self-talk, I wanted to shift things around. And one of the tools that I discovered and ended up trying and using with success was the use of affirmations. Please don't get me wrong. There's a lot more to dealing with automatic negative thoughts and than just using affirmations. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help. Therapy in general can help. And there are other skills that we can use, but affirmations was one of the simplest ways for me to just start the ball rolling on this process. And at first, I won't lie, I had my doubts. I was very skeptical that it would actually have a positive effect on me to use affirmations. It almost sounded a little silly, and I really, I really wasn't sure. I was very, very skeptical. But I decided that I had nothing to lose, and well, I had something to lose. I could lose my negative thoughts, but I wasn't able to see that. So I just decided to give it a try. And I started by, at first just recognizing when the negative self-talk would come and trying to shift the negative comment or the negative thought to something that was more caring, more self-compassionate, and more positive. And I wasn't able to do it in the mirror at first because I think I had watched a Saturday Night Live skit where someone was doing it, and it was kind of, they were making light of it, and they, and so I was kind of feeling a little bit like silly. I was feeling very silly about it. But what I did start to do is I would write down those affirmations, those ways that I was able to shift those thoughts that were coming to me. I would write them down on Post-it notes and I would stick them around my house. And whenever I would see the Post-it note in my house, I read it out loud and I smiled. Of course, there wasn't really an overnight shift in my thinking after starting this practice. It was something that really needed some time, and I needed to commit to doing it. And so I promised myself I would do it for at least a month and see how it went. And wouldn't you know it, after a month, I did actually start to feel a difference. When I was looking at these affirmations, they were starting not to feel like things that I was forcing or writing down on paper and just trying to fake it until I made it. it started to feel true. I started to believe the things that I was telling myself. And I'm bringing this up because our inner critic can sometimes be very mean. Let's not kid ourselves. It can be really, really mean. But really, the inner critic, and this was not just the inner critic, this was another thing altogether, but our inner critic or our automatic negative thoughts, when we have them, they can say really, really cruel things to us. And if you hear them enough, you start to believe them, and that brings you down. But the opposite is also true. If you shift the way you speak to yourself and you start telling yourself the things you want to believe about yourself, you do eventually start to believe it. Well, at least I can say it worked for me. And so every once in a while, when I'm having a bit of a challenging time, or I'm going through something challenging or difficult and I need a little bit of a pick-me-up, I remember my affirmations. And I have a little bag of like notes, affirmations that I've written over the years. I've also collected them from my time working as a counselor. We used affirmation in a lot of my groups. And I pull them out and I read them to myself. I also use oracle cards and tarot readings sometimes in the same way, because a lot of the information that comes from my oracle cards I find to be very uplifting. And I'm sharing this with you because I think it's just one of those little very simple tricks and tools that we can use to help pick ourselves up a little bit. Like I said before, it's not an overnight thing. It's not like it's going to shift the way you're thinking overnight, but with a little commitment to it, we can start to, number one, recognize when the negative thoughts come, acknowledge them, and also question them. And that there are skills in cognitive behavioral therapy that help you work through that. And then you can start to use the words you want to use to speak to yourself in a loving way. I hope this all makes sense. I don't know why I felt the need to go there, but I'm calling this painting Ode to Joy. And sometimes we need to look for the joy in a situation because it's not that obvious. And life is not easy. There are a lot of challenges and difficulties in this life, but there is also a lot of beauty and a lot of love and a lot of caring people. Like for me, every single week when I read the comments that I get from people I have never met, but people I connect with on a weekly basis or almost on a weekly basis, who send me such kind, loving words, I know there is good in this world. I have proof of it on my channel. So I guess this is my way of also saying a great big thank you to all of you for being here with me every week, for continuing to encourage me, to offer your words of kindness and compassion. It really means so much to me, and I appreciate you more than words can say. All right, it's time for me to get back to my painting process. And as you can see, I have pulled out my fountain my fountain pen, and I'm adding some stippling to the painting. And I'm basically just going to be adding the stippling to the swirls. And this is just to add a bit of value contrast and a tiny bit of detail that will be visible, but there will be other elements in the painting that probably will draw more attention. This is just a way of me, I guess, defining those swirls a little bit better. I'm not 100% sure yet what my focal point in this painting is going to be, but I did think that adding a circle to the middle of this circle here that's much bigger than all the other circles could potentially lead to this becoming the focal point. But the swirls are very eye-catching, so I'm not 100% sure that's going to work. But regardless, I thought it'd be neat to add a circle to the middle of this little, or this larger circle here, and to create vertical lines, but to do them in the opposite direction of the direction I did them in the other circles. I really like what I've created so far in this painting, but for me, the addition of this magic green is, I believe, going to be when this painting really starts to shift into something even more spectacular. I don't know why I felt like saying it that way, but it does feel like when you add something brilliant like the magic green or star gold or that 24 karat Merc gold by CSY Gallery to a painting, it adds a little extra bling for sure, but there's something about it. I don't know, it just kind of brings the painting to life, and I'm not surprised. I'm really, really loving that magic green in this painting so far. Now I'm going to move on to adding some gold, and I could have used my star gold, but I decided that the star gold was a little bit, I don't know what the, I mean, it feels like it's a little bit of a deeper yellow or something, and sometimes there are certain paintings in which I feel like a color that's not as deeply yellow might work well. So I decided, instead of pulling the star gold out, to pull out the 24 karat Merc gold from this little paint palette that I love so much, and I feel like it was the better choice. I'm going to add a little bit more of my magic green to the painting. And while I do this, I feel compelled to add that when I share my experiences with depression with you all, I do so because I want us to be able to speak openly about challenges with mental health. For too long, it has been taboo to talk about mental health, and I think that it's so important that we shift and start feeling comfortable about talking about mental health, because it's one of the ways out of depression. It's one of the ways that we can manage to deal with our mental health challenges. And when we're trying to deal with things all on our own, it's a lot more challenging than when we can speak openly with people that we know and trust. Now, I don't know most of you, but I feel comfortable doing this now because I have gradually worked up to talking more and more about it. There was a point in time in my life where I did not talk about it to anyone except for my doctor and, at one point, my counselor, but I didn't talk about it because I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed because there was so much stigma around mental health, and I didn't want to be perceived a certain way in a negative light. But now I know that a lot of people, in fact 20% of the population, has struggles with depression or other mental health challenges. And so that's a huge chunk of our population, 1 in 5 people. So if it's not you yourself who's being challenged with depression, anxiety, or other mental health issues, there's someone in your life who's certainly facing those issues. And when we can talk openly about these issues together, we can heal through them. I'm really loving the addition of the magic green and the 24 karat Merc gold. I really feel like it added a lot to this painting, and I love the movement of those swirls, the colors, how they combine together, and I'm feeling ready to say this painting is done. So I'm pulling off the tape and I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer to see some of those details. I'm really glad I decided to switch things up with my color scheme. This painting to me does sincerely feel like an ode to joy. It is bright, it's got a lot of movement that feels fun, and it was a joy to create. So I think it's definitely appropriately named if I call it an ode to joy. Another fun little fact about this painting is that it wasn't really all that hard to create. So I hope it can inspire you to pick up your paintbrushes and give it a try. Thank you for making the time to join me on my creative journey. I hope you have a wonderful week and happy creating!